The class reunion was set at a serene campsite perched on a mountain. As twilight approached, a landslide struck, trapping my husband, James, and me in our car under a massive boulder. The door was crushed, sealing our fate inside. Emergency services arrived swiftly, but the scene was grim. The vehicle was critically damaged and at risk of explosion. The only escape required a harrowing choice. One of us had to be freed by amputation due to the entrapment. The team leader, a firefighter named Tom, made the gut-wrenching decision to amputate my leg. He knew that for my husband, a professional dancer, losing his legs meant losing his soul. But I laughed bitterly, revealing my condition, hemophilia. I wouldn't survive the loss of a limb either. As the saw was about to touch my skin, I reflected on the irony. There I was, joking through tears about my impending death, while Michael wept uncontrollably. The physical pain was excruciating, yet it paled in comparison to the emotional torment. My heart ached, not just from the cut, but from the severed ties of a 7-year marriage that seemed to hang by a thread. In the ambulance, racing against time, I realized the full extent of my predicament. Michael's old flame, Sophia, whom he'd never stopped loving, was also present, her eyes filled with fear and sorrow. As I took my final breaths, Michael confessed in a haze of despair and drink that he regretted our marriage, bound not by love, but by financial desperation and familial duty. As life ebbed away from me, my last vision was of Michael and Sophia embracing tearfully, a tragic tableau of what might have been. In those last moments, I felt the sharp sting of betrayal sharper than the saw's blade, my heart breaking not from the disease or the impending death, but from the realization of unrequited love and unfulfilled promises. My spirit, heavy with grief, seemed to linger, watching as they drove away together, leaving behind a trail of broken vows and a shattered heart. As Sophia cried softly in his arms, the raw emotion visible in her eyes, she voiced her fears to Michael. Will I ever be able to dance again? Have my injuries ruined my chances? Her voice was tinged with vulnerability, reflecting her deep fears about her future in dance. Michael, always so reserved, responded with unusual gentleness, comforting her. Don't worry, Sophia, I'm here for you. Your injuries will heal and you'll dance again. Just rest now and let your body recover. Watching them together, my heart ached anew. For 5 years, Michael had been cold and distant, never once showing me such tenderness. A year before Sophia's return, after a night out, Michael confessed to me in a drunken blur of regret. He admitted he had married me out of necessity, not choice. Financial desperation had driven him to propose after his father was imprisoned and his mother fell ill. He had exhausted all his options before turning to me, the night before my graduation, under the dim lights outside my dorm. "Lucy, do you like me?" he had asked, his voice thick with emotion. I was too shocked to respond, knowing well that my feelings for him were no secret. Overwhelmed by his sudden vulnerability, I agreed to lend him the money, even if it meant buying his commitment. He kept his word. After his mother's successful surgery, he registered our marriage, though I sensed his heart was never truly in it. On our wedding night, he turned away from me, his attention fixed on a photo of Sophia. I spent the night alone, staring at the back of the man I married, realizing he might never love me. As the years passed, I became a reminder of his struggles, a wound that never fully healed, constantly reminding him of the sacrifices he had made. He grew to resent me as much as he resented his own impotence during those desperate times. My death might have seemed a release to him, a liberation from the past that haunted us both. Lost in these bitter reflections, I was startled when Sophia urgently gripped Michael's hand in the hospital room. "Michael, I'm scared. What if I lose my ability to walk, to dance? Please stay with me," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face like a frightened child. Ultimately, Michael couldn't stand to see Sophia in pain. As he gently tucked the blanket around her, he reassured her, "Don't worry, I'm here with you." His impatience was evident, as he rebuffed a colleague's suggestion to leave her side to attend to other urgent matters, saying, "What good would that do? Am I a surgeon? Can I reattach her leg myself?" Each of his words stabbed at me, highlighting the painful reality that despite 7 years together, whether caring for a pet or each other, it seemed my efforts to nurture our relationship had never been enough to make him love me, not even a little. Now, freed from the burden of obligation, he could pursue the love he truly desired without me in his life. Amidst his evident frustration, Michael's phone rang. It was his mother, urging him to come to the hospital to see me, believing I was severely ill. His mother had always tried to treat me well, acknowledging that it was my family's financial support that had saved their home. I had even promised her a weekend getaway to a hot spring, a plan that would now never come to pass. As Michael prepared to speak, Sophia, tears welling up, clung to him and pleaded, "Please, don't leave me. I have no one else." With a resigned sigh, Michael turned off his phone, ignoring his mother's call. It was a stark contrast to the deep commitment and love he displayed towards Sophia, making it painfully clear how little he had cared for me. Despite his previous claims of being unskilled at caregiving, he was tender and attentive with Sophia, washing her hair, and even her delicate clothing, tasks he'd never deigned to do for me. I had once been bedridden, desperately hoping for a sip of water from him, only to be met with indifference and excuses about his ineptitude at nurturing. Yet now, watching him care for Sophia with such dedication, I realized that the problem was never his inability to show love. He simply had never loved me. On the third day, my close friend, Danielle, arrived at the hospital carrying a death certificate and confronted Michael in a heated moment. "Lucy was alone at home while you were here catering to your mistress." "How is that right?" she demanded, slapping him across the face, leaving a mark that was hard to miss. Michael, grinding his teeth in frustration, retorted, "Lucy was my wife, not yours. It's none of your business." The argument escalated as Danielle slapped him again, this time out of sheer frustration at his lack of empathy. She then confronted him with the bitter truth. "Michael, who are you really married to? Lucy had hemophilia. Did you even care? You sacrificed her life for that woman." Michael, stunned and cornered, could only mutter about preparing the best prosthetic leg for Lucy, promising to find the best doctors to help her, a hollow promise as it was too late. Danielle, tears streaming down her face, pulled out a knife from her purse in a fit of rage, threatening to make Sophia pay for Lucy's lost leg. Sophia screamed and hid behind Michael, who managed to disarm Danielle, shouting, "Enough. There has to be some limit to this madness." In a bizarre twist, Michael showed me texts on his phone that Lucy had supposedly sent, filled with vile insults towards Sophia. How could Lucy have sent these messages if she was supposed to be dead? Confusion and accusations flew as Michael defended Sophia from Danielle's wrath. Danielle coldly laughed, each word laced with bitterness. "Stop your act, Michael. I can't imagine Lucy tolerating this from wherever she is." Her accusation that Michael was responsible for Lucy's death due to her hemophilia and the decision to amputate her leg struck a nerve. Michael, in a fit of anger, tried to track the sender of the inflammatory messages, only to find dead ends. The situation deteriorated as he threatened to divorce Lucy right then and there, believing her to be orchestrating this chaos from beyond the grave. Danielle, in her fury, threw the death certificate at him, urging him to open his eyes to the truth laid out in black and white on the document. The room was thick with tension as Danielle pointed at Michael, accusing him directly. "Look at the truth. It was the hemophilia that killed Lucy, not the surgery itself. You are the real murderer here." Michael, pale and shaken, grasped the certificate, his eyes scanning the damning words that might as well have been a sentence for his own guilt. Seeing the situation escalate, Michael sighed deeply, his voice softened by frustration and emotion. "This is all my fault," he lamented, his eyes welling up with tears. He was convinced that Lucy had faked her own death online just to manipulate him into returning to her, ignoring his current situation. "Just go back. Don't worry about me anymore. I'll be fine." His words were few, but they had an immediate effect on Michael, sparking a fierce reaction. In a fit of anger, he tore up the fake death certificate, exclaiming, "Lucy is smarter than I thought, using a fake document to trick me." How dare you treat my mother like a tool in your schemes, pushing her into this charade? I should have left Lucy alone on that mountain to learn how to be a proper wife. Each word was like a dagger to his heart, revealing a deep-seated pain that surfaced only as a hollow laugh followed by tears. Michael admitted to Danielle, "In this life, I have no more chances to learn, and in the next, I don't want to." Danielle, unable to believe what she was witnessing, stared intently at Michael. It was as if the years he had spent with her, making these cruel remarks in front of Lucy, had finally come back to haunt him. Losing his patience completely, Michael grabbed his phone and began angrily typing messages to Lucy, declaring that if she wouldn't respond, she should never bother to contact him again. In a fit of rage, he accused Lucy of tormenting his elderly mother, wondering aloud when Lucy would stop using him. He expressed deep regret for marrying her, wishing he had cut ties earlier upon realizing her true, manipulative nature. As Michael's red eyes and heaving chest indicated his extreme agitation, Danielle watched this unfold with a mix of anger and mockery. Eventually, she coldly told him to leave, to stop tainting Lucy's path with his presence. Disappointed and disillusioned, Danielle walked away. I felt a profound pity for Danielle, but as a spirit, I followed Michael as he tried to calm Sophia with a few soothing words before carefully closing the door behind him. He then walked lightly, occasionally taking out a phone I had never seen before to send some secretive messages. It turned out that Michael had always had a backup phone I didn't know about, which explained why I had often been unable to reach him. He stopped at a renowned artisanal shoe store to pick up a pair of ballet flats he had ordered, size 36, precisely measured by hand to ensure a perfect fit for another woman. In our 7 years of marriage, he had never remembered my birthday or our anniversary, nor had he known my clothing or shoe sizes, let alone my preferences. Now, effortlessly, he knew the exact shoe size of another woman, confirming that his indifference toward me was not due to incapacity, but simply because he didn't love me. After carefully packing the shoes, Michael drove to a nearby bakery, bending over the counter to scrutinize the selection of charming cakes he once scorned. He even asked if there were any low-sugar options available, mentioning that she couldn't have much sugar. The bakery staff praised him for his thoughtfulness and attentiveness to his girlfriend, a stark contrast to the man I had known. As the emotional toll nearly overwhelmed him, Michael quickly grabbed the delicate box of pastries and hurried back to his car, preparing to return to the hospital. I sat in the back seat, watching him occasionally adjust the box of sweets, his anxiety almost suffocating him. Suddenly, he slammed on the brakes and looked toward a street on the right. Following his gaze, I noticed 2 of his college friends, Charles and Bob, buying wreaths at a roadside paper store. "What's going on?" Michael parked the car and approached them. Charles, eyeing the cake box in the car, angrily confronted Michael. "You can't even bother to attend Lucy's memorial service, yet you have time to buy cake for someone else?" Bob, catching Charles's cold glance, also shot a stern look at Michael, who grew visibly darker with rage. He snapped back, "So even you two are part of this deception? What has Lucy promised you for helping her stage this whole drama?" In a fit of anger, he grabbed a wreath from the ground. "Even preparing wreaths, isn't this charade loud enough? Do you want to publicize it in the newspapers too?" Before he could finish his sentence, Bob punched him, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. In his eyes, a glint of chaotic fury sparked. Bob, usually calm and composed, had never joked about such serious matters. It seemed he was trying to find a justification. Michael, flustered, scrambled to use his phone, calling me frantically. "Lucy can't be dead. She just sent disgraceful messages to Sophia today. How could she possibly be dead?" Unable to hold back any longer, Bob picked up a paper figure from the ground and struck Michael on the head. "How can you be sure those messages were from Lucy? Did you see her send them? Did you hear her admit it?" The impact of the paper figure, although not physically painful, shook Michael profoundly. Blood streamed down from his brow, blurring his vision. Never before had anyone treated him with such disdain. Even as blood clouded his eyes, Michael remained silent, as if his soul had been drained, his face a mask of stupefaction. Red-eyed and continuously calling me, he tried to reassure himself. She likes to play tricks. Just wait, she will respond. But as he made call after call, his mouth trembled uncontrollably. Bob, devoid of any sympathy, struck him with a warning. Have you even checked on Lucy in the last 3 days? Have you heard her voice or asked about her well-being? How can you be so sure she's still alive? Collapsed in the driver's seat, Michael was haunted by the realization that for the past 3 days, Lucy hadn't sent him any messages, a stark deviation from her usual daily routine of morning and evening texts. This would have been unthinkable before. Moreover, Bob would never lie. Michael knew that even if everyone else might deceive him, Bob wouldn't. Shaking, he turned on his usual phone, which had been off for 3 days. As soon as it powered on, messages and calls flooded in like snowfall. Most were from his mother-in-law and our mutual friends, all relating to my supposed death. There were even photos of me bloodied and lying in an ambulance. Panicked, Michael looked up at Bob, at a loss for what to do. Bob and Charles turned away, unwilling to speak another word to him. Michael's eyes, red and trembling, scrolled through the messages desperately, repeatedly sending pleas for me to respond. Lucy, please don't do this anymore. Lucy, I was wrong. Lucy, please answer me. Enraged to his limits, Bob grabbed Michael by the collar and pulled him out of the car, across the street to the hospital's morgue. My mother-in-law was the first to reach us, slapping Michael twice, the sound of her hand striking his face echoing chillingly in the sterile environment. Charles and several mutual friends stood by, their expressions cold, watching without intervention. Suddenly, my nose tingled with the sharp sting of grief. My parents had died years ago, and I had thought that in my own death, no one would care. But there, my mother-in-law, crying, pulled Michael down next to my body. Where have you been these last 3 days? Lucy has been lying here alone, and you were where? Michael, overwhelmed with guilt, knelt on the ground, his tears flowing freely. He remained silent as my mother-in-law continued to question him relentlessly, determined to get answers. Finally, Charles stepped forward, sparing Michael no mercy as he exposed the most disgraceful aspects of his behavior. For the past 3 days, Michael has been at Sophia's side in a luxury hospital room, so engrossed that he couldn't find the time to mourn his own wife's passing. He even bought her cakes and flowers, Charles said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. My mother-in-law staggered, nearly fainting from the shock. She clutched Michael's collar, trembling as she demanded, "For a stranger, you amputated Lucy's leg, causing her to bleed to death. And before her body was even cold, you ran to another woman. How could I have given birth to such a monster?" For the first time, Michael's face showed sheer panic. I didn't know Lucy had a bleeding disorder," he stammered. Charles slapped him hard across the face. "What do you know then, as Lucy's husband? Tell us." Unable to speak, Michael's years of neglect became evident. He had never really tried to understand me. I was just a component in his life, maintaining the routine of our household. Staggering to his feet, Michael refused to accept the reality. "Lucy can't be dead. It must be a trick. You're all deceiving me. She was young, and her injuries weren't fatal. I've handled many similar cases without error," he argued between sobs and laughter, ignoring everyone's attempts to hold him back as he lunged for the white sheet covering my body. Bob pushed him back, shouting, "Get away. Don't you dare touch Lucy with your filthy hands. You've all deceived me." Driven to the brink, Michael pushed everyone aside and clutched a corner of the white sheet, convinced that unveiling it would prove it was all a hoax designed to provoke him. But as the sheet was pulled away, revealing my lifeless, pallid body, Michael froze. He stared at my body, carefully reaching out to touch the uneven, fatal wound on my head, a wound he had inadvertently caused. In a sudden intimate gesture that startled me, he stroked my cheek. During our 7 years of marriage, he had rarely shown such closeness. Such marital intimacy had been even rarer, and I couldn't delude myself into thinking he truly loved me. I felt he must have been driven mad by fear. Tenderly touching my face, Michael murmured to himself, "Lucy, please wake up. I know I was wrong. Don't be angry anymore. After you get better, I'll take you to see the snow, just like you always wanted." Feeling suddenly nauseous, a sensation from my life as Lucy, I remembered that Michael never used any affectionate nicknames for me. I was like a kitchen appliance in our home, only of interest when needed and then promptly ignored. At least, before I died, Michael never showed any signs of truly loving me. Now, his sudden display of deep affection was for whom to see. Charles, a good friend of mine, was immediately put off by this pretense. He couldn't stand looking at Michael, who was still pretending to be deeply emotional 3 days after my death. "Michael, you're just a beast, unworthy of the love Lucy gave you all these years. Go back to the light of your life, Sophia," Charles spat, his nails scratching Michael's face, leaving bloody trails. Michael, in his confusion, blurted out, "I never thought about divorcing Lucy. I thought she would always forgive me, no matter what I did wrong. I thought she'd never leave me." Tears streamed down Michael's face as he collapsed to the ground, his spirit in turmoil. "It's not that I didn't love Lucy. I just didn't feel worthy of her." Seeing this, I felt a pang of relief mixed with pain. It seemed my love had given him the excuse to take me for granted, believing I would never leave, allowing him to reserve his tenderness for another woman. At least before my death, Michael had never truly shown any signs of loving me. Now, displaying such depth of feeling, who was he performing for? Charles, a good friend, was also disturbed by this facade and couldn't stand to even look at Michael, who was still putting on an act of profound love 3 days after I had died. "Michael, you are a beast, not deserving of all the good Lucy did for you over the years. Go away and chase after Sophia, the bright light in your heart," Charles said bitterly, his sharp fingernails unintentionally scratching Michael's face, leaving marks streaked with blood. Michael, confused and mumbling incoherently, protested, "I never thought about divorcing Lucy. I just thought she would always forgive me, no matter what. I thought she'd never leave me." Tears streamed down his face as he collapsed on the ground, a picture of total despair. "It's not that I didn't love Lucy. I just felt that I didn't deserve her," he sobbed, overwhelmed by his emotions. Watching this scene, I felt a strange lightness mixed with pain. My unconditional love had given him the excuse to take me for granted, thinking I would never leave, allowing him to save his gentleness for someone else. But in reality, only when he uttered a simple sentence did I obediently return to his side. My youthful insecurities had become a knife, each metaphorical stab wounding the one person who loved him most in the world. Michael was greedy, wanting both to relive old dreams with Sophia and to have me light his way home. But in life, nothing is perfectly balanced. Thinking back on the struggles of the past 7 years, I wanted to laugh, but only tears as large as beans fell. After the cremation, Michael clung to my ashes, refusing to let go. Charles and Bob, suspicious of the insulting messages, called the police because the car accident was also strangely timed. The police merged the 2 cases for investigation. It wasn't long before they gathered crucial evidence that it was actually Sophia's close cousin who sent the insulting messages, aiming to drive a wedge between Michael and me. Sophia had orchestrated this, allowing her cousin to impersonate me and successfully deceive Michael because she and a prominent figure wanted a legitimate status for their child and had intentionally seduced Michael. The car accident was tampered with by the wife of the prominent figure, seeking revenge on Sophia, resulting in the only fatality being me, an innocent bystander. Once Michael learned of this, he drove himself mad, leading to his confinement in a mental hospital where he constantly held a doll, repeating, "Lucy, do you like me? Please smile at me, Lucy. Haven't you forgiven me yet? I know I was wrong. When you get better, I will take you to see the snow, just like you always wanted." Sometimes, I even felt that Michael could see me. He would often stare fixedly at the place where I used to be, occasionally breaking into an odd smile. At times, I found him pitiable. Other times, I despised him. Michael, overwhelmed by confusion, never understood why. On the second anniversary, as the snow fell heavily, a rare occurrence, he remembered my longing to see a great snowstorm. During my last meal before my graduation, everyone had spoken freely about their hopes and dreams for the future. Michael had asked me if I had nothing I wanted to do. Confused and disconnected, I had only replied that I wanted to watch a big snowstorm.